Hi, Zizaran here with another video for the upcoming Crucible League. And this video is going to have tips and tricks to make sure you do the best you can do and have a great league start. First off, selecting your build is really important. The number one thing is obviously do whatever makes you have the most fun. However, a good tip is to always have something that you know isn't going to rely on uniques, is going to scale really well, and can get a lot of the things that you want for other builds later. So number one thing that I focus on, I play something that I know is going to scale with levels and that I'm very certain is going to be solid. So if you see something that looks a little bit experimental, maybe steer clear and try it as a second or third build. Another thing to keep an eye out for too, sometimes people will exaggerate Path of Buildings a lot. If it sounds too good to be true to be a league starter, a lot of the time it is. Sometimes people will take a lot of crazy things, so be careful of what guides you are following. Another great tip for league start, especially the low levels, is that there's a lot of vendor recipes that are useful. Remember that the vendor recipe for rings is going away, so we can no longer get flat spell damage on a wand. But what you can do is there is actually a whetstone recipe. This might not always be the best, but it is good for things that don't benefit from flat damage to spells. If you are looking for something that is like a direct hit build, so spark or something, you're probably better off either alching or using an essence on your wand and just hoping. Another thing that's really useful as well is once you kill piety, you get flat damage to lightning spells. So you'll be a little low on damage until then, but at least you do have that as an option. There are other vendor recipes as well. For example, a blue or a rare rustic sash, a weapon, and a whetstone. Both of these recipes with chain belt and rusty, I don't think they work with white, but they do work on both blue and rare. So the rare one will give you a higher tier. It also works for bows, since there's a lot of people that are looking at starting bows this league. There are other recipes as well. If you do find a bunch of iron rings, they're actually useful to turn into topaz, ruby, etc. And a really good tip for crafting amulets early, because you can often have very few scour orbs. You can turn an amulet, any amulet, into an onyx amulet. It'll keep the same item level. If you want to save scours and you end up having a bunch of essences or alchemies, this can be a great way to just get yourself a basic amulet early on. And it just costs 3 wisdoms each try, which is obviously a lot easier and more accessible than scourings early. Another great tip for early is to make sure you're using your crafting bench. But what a lot of people do is they'll either use a transmute or an alchemy before crafting. And sometimes that'll lead that you'll get an item like this where it doesn't really have movement speed or anything useful that you actually wanted. But it's full, you can't craft on it. However, it's very important to know that you can actually craft on a white piece of item. And this is actually really good. So early on, the majority of my gear, all I'm looking for is sockets and links. So I'm looking for the 3 links and 4 links that I really want, and then I'll craft resists. So even as early as Act 2, I'll be fully resist capped. And you can still augment it afterwards as well and hope that you hit what you want. A thing I really want to mention for those that haven't paid attention to the patch notes is very often you'll see people recommend foothills farming to get things like Devouring Diadem. And this can still be a great way to get really good betrayal gear and stuff like that. But what a lot of people traditionally do is that they farm Katarina here in foothills, and in the last patch that we were playing, you would get a diadem 50-50 chance. That is most likely changed, so I just want to warn you that you're not doing like 20 Katarinas there and wondering how you've been so unlucky and you don't get a helmet. You're wondering what the foothills tip is, you keep renewing the zone, and here on the right you'll see the quest text pop up. It'll say either research, fortification, or transport. Intervention can't actually spawn because it doesn't give the pop-up until they're all new, and since you're just spam renewing, then yeah. This could also sometimes be good to engage with the league mechanic. Obviously don't know that yet since it's not out yet. And yeah, this character is too high, so we'll never see it on this. I actually don't have a level 72 or below character at the moment. Yeah, and the league mechanics always start, they stop spawning once you're 10 levels or above. So again, a real good reason to do this. You get loads of like the unveils that you need. So you can get trigger craft, you can get lucky and get Elveon, etc. early. And obviously if you unveil like a +2 helmet and you only have a 4 link, that could be huge, right? That's almost the same as having a 5 link. So really good to get some gear here. Now another tip, and this is sort of the start of the end game. And I only have red missions here, but early on you'll have some white Kirac missions, and there's a few tips with these. This one, find the stack of divination cards is incredibly strong. And this goes by the cards that are in that map. So we can look up on divcards.io what is in Lookout. And this is made by one of my community members, Mariner. And he sort of like ranks them, etc. And you can like see what these different things are, what the reward is. And this is very useful because there's obviously not a huge chance that you get the best div card, but I've actually used this quite a lot to get early 6 links, to get uniques that aren't crazy rare. So let's say that you're going to go into a rare map like Shrine that drops the Fiend, right? There's a very low chance that the Fiend will drop, but you will get a full stack, so you get an instant Headhunter. So what I look for here is cards that are really useful, but really common. So some examples is a lot of the maps like Cage, Cells, etc. They drop the Chains That Bind, and this is incredibly common. I did a little test, and I think I did 10 or 15 full div cards in those types of maps, and I got like 6 or 7 6 links. So it's a lot more common than you would think. It's also really good for like the desert maps that drop the 22 card for 6ing Imperial Bow. It's really good for like Courtyard and those kinds of maps. Terrace that drop the 6ing short bow card, because a lot of these are actually pretty droppable. So very, very good for maps like that. So that's the number one thing I always look out for. You can also hold Alt and use it to do completion. So it is useful for that as well. Now do remember that as soon as you start one of these missions, the Kirac shop will reset. And not only can it sell you maps that you don't have yet, it can sell you maps like the Cortex. Now, possibly my favorite mapping tips for doing things early is 3-to-1 recipe. So here we have a forking river, and I'll show you on the map where that is. This is tier 2 here, and you can see it's connected to Caldera and Bone Crypt. So if we run it, that's the 2 maps we can drop. However, if we don't run it and you always pick up maps that you don't need, you no longer use them, but you will always pick them up because of the 3-to-1 recipe. And we can see here that there's a bunch of maps: Port, Plateau, Cove, Sepulture, loads of maps that we aren't even connected to. And sometimes you end up getting like a bunch of completion here, and maybe you're missing one map there, one map there. Well, 3-to-1 recipe has your back. You see that these 3 forking rivers, they sell for coves. These 3, they sell for Caldera. And it doesn't matter what direction I put these in. These 3 and these 3, no matter what I do with them, will always be the same. That's very important because they have their own item ID. So with those 3, the combinations we can get is Caldera and Coves. We can start mix and matching. So what if I do these 3? Coves, these 3, Caldera, these, Bone Crypt, these, also Bone Crypt. But we have so many more combinations we can do. Now, Phantasmagoria. And now, Bone Crypt again. Port, Sepulture, Caldera, Coves. And you can go through, I think it's 7 or 8 maps you need, and you can get, so statistically, you can get every map the tier above. You don't really need to understand how it works, but it's basically, think of it as like you have 2 different vials with 2 different item IDs. And the different item IDs will give you different results. Kirac is also a really good source of getting your unique maps early. So do make sure you check it. And it does update sometimes. I think it's when a new map thing is about to unlock or is unlocking. So it does reset sometimes without you actually doing a daily. And you do get a daily every day. And there's a skill point you can take that gives you 2 dailies every day. Sometimes if I'm playing a lot, in the first 3 days, I like to spec into this just before the reset and spec out of it after. I think it's like UK midnight or UK 1 a.m. And you just need to have it for like those 5 seconds. So if you don't want to have it all the time, could be cool to spec into just for 1 more daily. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope this gives you a great league start in Crucible. Thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.